Hello booktube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Marilyn and I'm here today with some hibiscus tea like I was the last time, but also with a tag. Wait, don't go anywhere. This tag is more than a tag. It is, for me, a love letter to some of my favorite booktubers, so stay tuned. I just wanted to mention that I'm still drinking hibiscus tea because I want to finish the small box that I started. It's very bitter, but I had a nurse come today who checked my blood pressure and it went down 30 points. So whatever I'm doing, it's working. Anyway, let me tell you more about the tag. Now the tag is called the New Windows and Mirrors Reading Tag, and Pat from Book Chat with Pat, one of my favorite booktubers and human beings, originated it. It's her original book tag. And before I go any further, it's called the New Windows and Mirrors Reading Tag because of Karen of Roving Reader had a similar tag. So she wanted to distinguish it from that tag. It's a little complicated, at least to me. It's based on a reading practice and a professor. It's a reading style that can be related to reading. And this professor wrote about students needing to be able to look through window frames to see the realities of the lives of others. Additionally, she said, students need to be able to look into mirrors as well, to see their own reality reflected as part of a larger human experience. And that sounds really good. It's a little complicated, and I have a lot of books to show you and a lot of authors and a lot of booktubers. And it only has 4 prompts, so it should have been easy, right? But no, it wasn't easy for me, and as we get through it, I'll tell you why. Let me just take one more sip. I think it was difficult for me because I had to realize that I'm an eclectic reader. And also, I'm not the same reader I was when I started BookTube 5 years ago. So the first prompt is, talk about a few books that served as mirrors to you, allowing you to see some aspect of your life experience reflected in a meaningful way. This part was easy. Usually books that reflect part of me are, number 1, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I just finished rereading this book and I need to reread it again. That's how wonderful this book is. Why does it mirror my reading habits or myself? It's because I lived, as everyone knows, in the same exact neighborhood that the author Betty Smith and Francie, her protagonist from A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, lived. And not, let's say 20 years after. So I was there in the 50s, and this takes place maybe 40, 50 years before. So it was very familiar to me. Not only the streets, but the way people were. I could imagine it because they weren't much different when I was in the 50s. Of course, there were many differences. In fact, all the streets that she talks about were cold water flats, and they were torn down to make way for the most modern project that ever was attempted in New York. And I think I told you about that, and that's the Williamsburg housing project. And it was, it had an architect who worked on the Eiffel Tower, and it was a wonderful place to grow up, especially if you came from those cold water flats that were like railroad flats, didn't have hot water. That's why they were called cold water flats. But anyway, also the fact that Francie loved books like I did, and though we didn't have a fire escape in the projects, there were still houses around that did have those fire escapes. And this is what it looks like. And just the way people were, I could have imagined it, and the way that Williamsburg, Brooklyn had its different parts, different tiny little neighborhoods where the Irish people lived, where the Jewish people lived. And yeah, so this book, it just soothes my soul. It reflects who I am as a person, who I was. And this book is a favorite of many, many people because they see themselves, even if they were brought up in a completely different place. I mean, they could be brought up like my friend Jack, who recently read it with me, in England, and still be able to see themselves in Francie and everything she goes through. And if I keep on talking so much about, I won't get through this video, but I had to, of course, talk about that book that reflected me. Another book is a young adult book that reflected me in a way for almost the same reason, and that is Nilda by Nicolasa Moore. And here's the cover. So this says it's suitable for children 10 and up, but adults definitely can read it. And it was awarded the James Adams Children's Book Award. And the novel follows a Puerto Rican girl named Nilda. She grows up in the New York City barrio during the 1940s, exploring themes of coming of age, poverty, and family. And because I was brought up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and my father was Puerto Rican, it was very, I can see a lot of the way the people were, the way that part of my family, the Puerto Rican side, the way, what was important to them, and the food and how they treated people and how they were in the 40s. I had never read a book about a Puerto Rican who was born in the US in the 40s. So, I mean, my father came to New York, I think in 49, and this is before that. And how different the school system was, and how different. Nilda also, like Francie, wanted an education, loved reading. So in a way, these are almost two sides of the same coin that reminded me of myself. I can talk about a lot of books that reminded me of myself, but I don't think I've talked about this one enough, and that's The Memory Palace, which is a memoir by Mira Bartok. And it says it's a heartbreaking, exquisitely told story of a daughter's struggle to find beauty and order in the distorted, chaotic world created by her mother's delusions. And someone else said it's almost a fairy tale. Two little girls grow up under the spell of their mother's madness, but it really did happen once upon a time, and Mira Bartok uses her considerable powers of recollection and compassion to understand the family and to present them to readers as complete, loved human beings. This is an extraordinary book. And I think I also shared that I had a mother with severe mental illness, and this resonated with me very much for many reasons that I won't go into now, because then this video will be too long. But of all the books that reflected a mirror to myself is my own book that's out of print, but I thought I'd show it to you. It's called From Agoraphobia to Zen. It was published by an English publishing company, and I'm thinking of doing a reprint because I don't think there is a Zen in mental illness. Towards Zen maybe will be the new, and this is my experience of having agoraphobia and other mental illnesses like panic disorder, but it's also about growing up in that neighborhood that we're talking about in that time in the 50s. So what better book could represent me than my own book? That's a mirror into me, and it actually helped me recover. So I really suggest or recommend that people who suffer from anything, whatever physical or mental illness, write. Even if you think you're not a good writer, it's so healing. So it was healing to me. So yeah, so that's enough for that question. The second prompt is talk about a couple of booktubers whose reading is most like your own. this is where I got stuck, and I'll tell you why. When I first joined BookTube, first watching and then becoming a content creator, I was looking for mostly mysteries and people who love Agatha Christie, for example. And the booktubers I found, the one that most mirrored, or I should say, not mirrored, but whose reading was most like my own, was a wonderful booktuber who passed away, who was Janelle of Too Fond of Books, and she loved Agatha Christie, and we also read together another mystery writer, and her name was Patricia Wentworth, and this book is The Eternity Ring. And Miss Silver is sort of like a Miss Marple. So, and she recites Tennyson, which is I love Miss Silver. If you've read Miss Silver, let me know. And I have 2 copies of Death on the Nile, or maybe 3, because it's really one of my favorite of Agatha Christie's, though I can't really pick a favorite. So, when I first started, that's the kind of books that I was really looking for, Golden Age mysteries. And then I found Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures. She reads romances, which I don't, but she also reads a lot of Agatha Christie and other mysteries, and also translated fiction, which I grew to like, but that will come later. So I really can't say that there was a certain booktuber who mirrored my own kind of reading, who's most like me in reading. But then, of course, I changed. And don't get me wrong, I also used to read Jane Austen, and I joined, in the first year that I was here on BookTube, I joined all the events for Jane Austen July, and I really dipped my toes into different genres, or genres that were familiar to me, but I'm very picky. I'll have to admit, Pat, she opens herself up to so many genres, even horror, which I never could or will. I guess because of there goes my anxiety again. I did like Gothic fiction, like Rebecca. So there was a certain point where I would go into that, but not totally. So I couldn't find anybody. Also, another booktuber we lost, Alice, from Alice's Giant Bookshelf, really had a lot of different books, nonfiction, that I bought because of her, as well as Agatha Christie. So these were the booktubers that I first started watching. Fortunately, we lost 2 of them. But I still read mysteries, and I watch it too. So I'm hoping that there will be other booktubers who like police procedurals, and other kinds of mystery books that will be coming up soon, because I'm sure there are. I just haven't found them yet. Now let's get to the third prompt. And this one is really interesting because it's a way that I can really shout out booktubers that have changed my reading life and my real life in so many ways. So talk about a few books that served as window frames to you, allowing you to see the reality of others outside of your experience. And that would be what? Every book I have beside the ones I told you about. First I'll talk about Miss Reed, Thrush Green. And Gina Stanier is the one who sent me this book and really got me interested in reading about this small English town that I had never heard of, where you find a teacher who really cares about her students in this little one-room schoolhouse. And if you've never read any of Miss Reed, who was a real teacher, I really never thought that I would get into reading. And this is not a children's book. it's a comfort book, and Gina Stanier is the queen of comfort books. So I love to read my misread books. So that's one book. The other book, and I have a lot of them, so I'm going to get through them as quickly as I can. When I joined BookTube, I was very ignorant of Canadian fiction. I really didn't know it was a thing. Of course it was a thing, but it wasn't a thing that I was aware of. And Lindy of Lindy's Magpie Reads, we read Margaret Lawrence. I think we read all of her books. And this one is The Diviners. And my favorite was The Jest of God, where I'll have a copy over here. And that novel was turned into a movie called Rachel, Rachel with Joanne Woodward. I think Paul Newman might have been in it, I'm not sure. And it follows schoolteacher Rachel Cameron through a summer affair and its consequences on her life. Although Rachel is in her 30s, the book serves to document a second adolescence as she comes to recognize herself as the adult to her aging mother. And this was a series that Margaret Lawrence wrote of the fictional town of Manawaka. And the real town is in Manitoba, Canada, called Nipawa. I hope I'm saying that right. But I really enjoyed my introduction to Canadian fiction through a couple of Canadian booktubers. And we have some wonderful Canadian booktubers on BookTube that have opened my booktube life and my life up to new types of reading. And that was two of them. Another book that I would never have known about if it wasn't for a booktuber, and that's Sean of Sean Breathes Books, and that's The Country Girls. And Edna O'Brien wrote a trilogy of this book, The Country Girls. And so it's about two girls, Kate and Baba, two Irish country girls, so very different from my experience, who have spent their childhood together. As they leave the safety of the convent, another thing that's not something I'm familiar with, they're in search of love and life in the big city, and they struggle to maintain their tumultuous relationship. And it's really tumultuous. I love this whole trilogy. I suggest it, and I thank Sean for introducing me to Edna O'Brien, as well as Barbara Pym, by the way. So big shout out to Sean. And I'm not sure if I read this with Lindy or not, but I know I read the Manawaka series with Lindy. Okay, so now we get to the last prompt, and it's sort of my favorite prompt because I'm going to shout out to some people. Talk about a couple of booktube channels that have expanded your horizons, helped you to explore books or genres outside of your comfort zone, or challenged you in some way. I can say all of these people, including the people that I talked about, like Lindy and Gina, but I'm going to mention some booktubers that brought me to a place, like Sean, where I never would have thought of going. And one of those booktubers is Lil, from Lil's Vintage World. And she has introduced me not only to books of Henry VIII and all of the English royalty books, but also to one of my favorite authors, Barbara Comyns, who I talk about. I didn't like this book as much as the others. One thing about Barbara Comyns is that she writes every book of hers is different, unusual, and wonderful. And I think I have 2 copies of this book. And this is The House of Dolls. And it has quite the premise. Well past their prime, the 4 ladies who live at Mulberry Grove remember better days of parties and servants, when rent was something to be collected, or that's what they pretend. Nowadays, they remember the rent only too well. Once a servant herself, Amy Dahl is a reluctant madam to her genteel lodgers of higher class and lower morals, all too well aware that this little business of their makeshift brothel is not without their occupational hazards. It's not as dirty as it sounds. It's how these women are trying to get along in life when they have no money. And it does have a happy ending. And like I said, it's not pornographic, but it's certainly, as someone says, wickedly funny and profoundly sad. It's a magical novel, written in the deceptively simple common style, a paced-down prose of childlike clarity. And that's what I love about Barbara Cummins. She's so unusual, like Cyndi Lauper. I do want to talk about Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, who reads literary fiction, translated fiction, and she's my heroine. She is the one who introduced me to Anita Buchner of the Hotel du Lac fame. And this is her other book that I have here on my bookshelf, A Start in Life. I read almost all of the books that, because Sarah was reading the whole oeuvre, as she puts it, of Anita Buchner. And I personally like the latter books better than these earlier books, though I did love Hotel du Lac, which was winner of the Booker Prize. So it is a wickedly funny book. And if you haven't read Hotel du Lac, this is a picture of Anita Buchner. And you know, when I was talking last time, I was talking about George Simenon. And in one of his books, in all of his books, he has blurbs. And Anita Buchner said he's one of the most wonderful writer of the 20th century, which I thought was high praise from Anita Buchner. I had to have my dictionary ready every time I read Anita Buchner. Her vocabulary is that high. In this book, we meet a lot of different people and their lives, and it's all around this fancy hotel, Hotel du Lac. It's funny, it's poignant, and it's just elegantly written. And I suggest all of Anita Buchner's books, but they were a challenge for me because I had never read an author who wrote such beautiful but very formal, or a prose that I had to reach for, let's put it that way. So I thank Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, because if you look at her channel, she really stretches her reading so intelligently. And also, every single video she does, there's always a book, either a translated Japanese fiction or just an author I've never heard of. So I really have to shout out also to Sarah of Hardcover Hearts as a love letter to a booktuber. I'm also going to mention Margaret Pinard, who introduced me to a lot of 20th century fiction. And she's also started BookTube at the same time I did. So I think she's having her 5-year anniversary around the same time that I did. And she's a wonderful author and booktuber. And she does a lot of lives. And I don't like everything it's not everything she reads is not to my taste. But when she does, give me a book that's to my taste, it's spot on. And I found so many wonderful books because of her. And then I'm going to shout out to Roz of Scalladandling about the books. She also has a wonderful channel that I urge you to check out. Sometimes she's with her daughter Tilly, and they just have give me a wonderful variety of different books that I never would have thought about. So check out her channel, as well as Priscilla from Evening Reader, who I mentioned in my last video. We both loved Lucia Berlin, and I had a copy of Evening in Paradise, and it was wonderful. And she always brings up books that I am excited to read. Her first book was A Manual for Cleaning Women, and unfortunately she wasn't well known because when she became popular, it was 11 years after her death, and I really appreciated that Priscilla also loved this book, as well as so many other, I would call it literary fiction books that she brought to my attention. And I just love her videos anyway. She's very funny. She's a writer, and please check out her channel, if I know you already have. Then there's some other booktubers I wanted to mention. Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading, a very good friend of mine, and she reads a lot of Shakespeare, which I don't, but I aspire to. I mean, I read a few, Hamlet and a Merchant in Venice, but I really love that she stretches herself to read so many wonderful books, and she's a wonderful person, very kind person. So please check out her channel. And of course, Book Chat with Pat, who created this wonderful, quite difficult tag. She is an inspiration. She loves poetry. I used to write some poetry, so sometimes she inspires me to maybe do a short with a poem on it. And let me also shout out Angelia of Read and Reread, who is doing endless drama. I love plays. She has really encouraged me to read more plays. I mean, I can go on and on of all of the wonderful booktubers who have inspired me. And in fact, I'm going to have more that I didn't think of right now. I'll put them down in the description box. So thank you so much, Pat, for creating this challenging, for me at least, tag where I can shout out my favorite booktubers and how they help me grow. Because they're so different from me, or maybe some of them are like me, not as many, but they're making me different. They're making me change into a more diverse reader. And I'm not going to say that I'm going to go out and read horror or romance, because yeah, I don't do that anymore. Don't get me wrong, I did read romance and fairy tales and fantasy, and I do like a little bit of magical realism, as long as it doesn't go too far. But I'm going to read what comforts me and what I like to read, and that's what we should all do. So I hope you stayed here until the end of this a little bit challenging tag. Thank you, Pat, and thank everyone for watching and staying with me. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you liked this rambling channel. And I will say, as I always do, aloha.